Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Tax Credit Program Application Writing webinar. Thank you for joining us for the second time this week. I'm Melissa Latham. I'm the Director of Communications and Policy at CDFA. We anticipate this morning's presentation, including time for questions, will run from now until about 11:30 this morning. And today we're really focused on providing you a review of what potential applicants can expect from working with CDFA, an overview of the 2025 application process, and then we're really going to walk you through the tax credit program application, as well as our clean energy programs and 2025 energy policy, data resources for you to consider as you develop your application, and lastly, we'll discuss next steps in the application process. And I just want to take a moment to emphasize that this morning is really focused on the tax credit program. And so this program is one that you might be familiar with in terms of larger investments in infrastructure projects throughout the state. We will have the opportunity to discuss more in depth with you the capacity building program and that application process next week, January 16th, in a separate workshop. So again, today we will be focused on the tax credit program, and we'll have the opportunity to really walk you through that capacity building application next week. So if that's of interest, we certainly encourage you to register for that, and we'll be sharing links of that at the end of today's workshop, as well as email follow-up. And if you're interested in pursuing both, we look forward to having you join us this morning as well as next week. So again, we will be recording today's session, and we will share that recording along with the presentation and the slides and links to relevant resources in the coming days. We ask that if you have questions that you post them in the Q&A box, as we will be pausing throughout today's presentation to answer those questions. And if we could, we'd love to just start with some introductions. If you could take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat and the organization that you're here representing today. And also, if you'd like to share in a couple of words why you're joining us this morning to learn more about the tax credit program. Now I'm going to ask our team to take a moment to introduce themselves as you'll be engaging with them throughout the application process. And with that, I'll hand it over to Betsy to start with introductions.
Good morning. My name is Betsy McNamara. I'm principal and consultant with Full Circle Consulting based in Concord. And this year I'm contracted by CDFA to oversee the tax credit program. And I can be your first line of contact for questions or support if needed.
Good morning. My name is Maureen Quinn, and I'm the Tax Credit Program Manager. And I have the good fortune to work with applicants as well as awardees from all the way from application through the closeout of an award if you're so fortunate. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Molly Donovan. I'm the Director of Economic Development, and I'm your contact for the Capacity Building Program.
Hello, everyone. I'm Scott Maslansky. I'm Director of Clean Energy Finance, and I manage the energy policy requirement for the tax credit program I'll be talking about more later. I'm also a reviewer for the tax credit program.
Good morning. My name is Priscilla Baez, and I'm the Customer Experience Manager. I'm also the primary contact for our grant management system, and I also manage the CDFA's Grant Writing Assistance Program.
Good morning. My name is Nate Olson. I support the CDFA with their data work as well as their grants management system. I'm your point of contact for any data-related application questions, and you might interact with me as well if you encounter any technical issues with our platform.
Great. Thank you, everybody. So I'm going to launch this. I want to introduce myself a little more. My name is Betsy McNamara, and as I mentioned before, I'm a consultant. I've been working with nonprofits and consulting for decades, and I have written many applications. I actually took some time to count. I think it's 14 over the 25-year history of CDFA I've written 14 tax credit applications over those years. And so I have a lot of experience sitting on your side of the desk. And this year I get to work with CDFA on managing their tax credit application process from CDFA's side of the desk. So it's really helpful for me to be able to bring some of my own personal knowledge and experience of how to write an application throughout this workshop, but also work with you on so that you can understand what CDFA can offer and how best to write this application to give your organization and your project the most clear path to success. So CDFA offers a lot of support to applicants and organizations. It's committed to supporting applicants and tax credit awardees throughout the entire process. CDFA works closely with potential applicants during the pre-application phase to understand their needs, align those needs with CDFA's technical assistance and financing resources, and understand other potential sources of support, as well as help strengthen the project's capacity for success by addressing any potential challenges early on. Here are some very specific ways that CDFA can support you during the application writing process. So the first thing is a pre-app meeting. We're going to talk about this a couple times. These meetings give you the opportunity to meet with CDFA staff, share the details of your project, and access guidance specific to your application. And we'll share instructions on how to request a pre-application meeting when we send up follow-up materials in the coming days. The Resource Hub is an easy to navigate online platform that provides guidance on CDFA program objectives and eligibility, the application process, as well as how to successfully implement a project leveraging our resources. You'll also find definitions important to your application writing there, such as what is community economic development, and what do we mean by collaboration or community building, or what is asset-based community development. These definitions are also in the tax credit application and guidelines. And then CDFA provides ongoing technical assistance from concept initiation through project implementation, and this includes assistance throughout the application writing process. As Priscilla mentioned, we do have a grant writing assistance program. It's designed to help smaller organizations with limited capacity or experience to obtain the assistance of a professional grant writer who can help develop a strong and viable CDFA tax credit application or a capacity building tax credit program application. Applicants can apply for up to $2,500 to hire grant writers. They need additional capacity, language access, or other technical support to successfully submit an application. And applications for grant writing assistance, a very simple application that you can find on our grant management system. Those applications are open until January 31st. So it is a first come, first serve. So you can, if you feel like this is something you need, you want to move on that. And we also have a number of grant writing consultants who have agreed to have their names put forward as grant writers interested in working with you. Additional information on how to apply for grant writing assistance can be found in the application and program guide. This is the timeline for the application. So the applications are already available on the grant management system, and a PDF of the application and guidelines is available now, and Melissa's going to drop that link in the chat throughout this meeting. The link will also be included in follow-up to this webinar. That application and guidelines document is your source of all information about the application and the tax credit program. And we ask that before you reach out to CDFA for questions, make sure you've reviewed that thoroughly. The next step is pre-application meetings. We really encourage you to set those up, and you'll receive instructions on how to set a meeting with CDFA staff in the coming days. And then after that, until the deadline, you can reach out as you have questions or need technical help with the grants management system. And then finally, the application is due at 4 o'clock on March 7th. There are no exceptions for late or incomplete applications. So of course, as with most online applications, the best plan is to plan to submit a day or two before the deadline. CDFA conducts its application review from March through May, and this includes a site visit, either in person or virtual, and then notifications of the tax credit award occur the week of June 9th. I thought I would go through a reminder of how the tax credits work. This program is a cooperative partnership between the organization receiving tax credits, a donating business, and CDFA. So the first step is that CDFA awards the tax credit based on state fiscal year 26, which starts July 21st, 2025. Step 2, the organization that received the award, and hopefully that's you if your organization is selected, secures pledges. And a pledge is a promise from a New Hampshire business to donate funds to your project. Step 3 is the business sends its donation to CDFA on a chosen date. It does not send the donation to your organization. It sends it to CDFA. Step 4 is funds for projects are available to be released to the project once fundraising has been completed in accordance with your contract requirements. And then step 5 is that CDFA provides the business with a tax credit letter documenting the donation so they can take the credit. So to clarify, your organization receives the actual funding only once the business has paid its pledge. To say that another way, this is the timeline of the grant process. So we're gonna receive notifications of the award the week of June 9th, June 25th. We're gonna have a virtual tax credit 101 training where we cover how to fundraise and manage the tax credit allocation. In July, CDFA has an electronic pledge portal, and it will upload all the tax credit awards made in June, so that donors may easily make pledges online. Also in July, your work to fundraise and secure pledges from businesses starts. At this point, you can collect pledges for tax credits allocated to your project, and businesses will choose a date or dates to make payment on the state fiscal year 26 pledges. All pledges for state fiscal year 26 tax credits are due by March 31st, 2026. And all businesses must fulfill their state fiscal year 26 pledges by giving the funding to New Hampshire CDFA by June 30th, 2026. If your project also receives state fiscal year 27 credits, you will follow the same timeline starting July 1st, 2026 and ending June 30th, 2027. So again, if you receive notification of a tax credit award in June, you don't receive funding until your tax credits are sold and the business has made the payment. Because tax credits awards can span 2 fiscal years, you may not actually receive the full amount of your tax credit award for up to 24 months after you receive an award letter. So if your project needs the funding sooner in order to move forward, CDFA does have a bridge loan program. The bridge loan program enables an organization that has received CDFA tax credits to access financing sooner than it might if it waits for the tax credit funding to actually arrive. There's a standard underwriting process to qualify for a bridge loan, and it is only available if your project is awarded tax credit. So please feel free to ask CDFA staff for more details on the bridge loan program and whether it would be a good fit for your project. So I would like to pause briefly here to see if there are any questions yet.
Hey, Betsy, there's actually no questions just yet, but you did pack in a lot of information real quickly there. So definitely encourage folks as you percolate on that to drop questions into the Q&A box. And we'll have another pause once we get through a couple more slides to answer those questions. So thanks, Betsy.
Terrific, thank you. So now we're going to move into the tax credit application process. It's helpful as you start writing this application to know what CDFA's evaluation of the tax credit application entails and what it really focuses on. What CDFA's evaluation really focuses on is impact and readiness. CDFA receives applications demonstrating many different levels of public benefit, public purpose, and readiness. And so yours will be most competitive if you can demonstrate both high public benefit, public purpose, and high readiness. So I would like to take a moment to talk about what readiness looks like. By readiness, we really mean a framework. It's not a hard and fast rule. We balance readiness with impact. Most applications demonstrate impact. About 50%, though, take off all aspects of readiness. So CDFA works to ensure impact and support readiness. And these are the 4 components of what we mean by a readiness framework. So community engagement and support, just meaning that you've engaged your community. It's very clear that this is a project the community needs and supports. You have a proven need for the project and a proven need for funding. In other words, you can't get the funding anywhere else. CDFA is going to be a critical part of your finance package for your project. Project readiness, this really looks at your organizational leadership, the capacity of your organization to fulfill this project as proposed. It looks at your strength of your board, strength of your organization, and it also includes adherence to the clean energy policy, which is something Scott is going to go into more detail on later. And then finally, readiness incorporates the strength of your networks with the business community. And that is, of course, so that you can, we appreciate that you can market your tax credits and actually fulfill those pledges. The application and program guide has a lot of additional information on readiness, as does the webinar we presented on Tuesday. And you can access the recording of that webinar and the slides in the follow-up email that Melissa will send in a few days. This is the application outline. And what I'd like to do is go through each of these sections of the application. The application lives on CDFA's Grants Management System, or GMS. And later in this webinar, Nate will walk us through how to register for the Grants Management System and how to start an application. The same information is available on CDFA's Resource Hub, as well as information about this is available in the application and program guide. So let's go through each of these components one at a time. And I'm going to start with the last one first, because it's unusual from the rest of the application in that it requires that you actually download, print out, and have your authorized official actually sign this document. So this certification is required for every organization, and the certification confirms several things: that all statements are true and accurate to the best of your knowledge, and that the application is being submitted with the full knowledge and approval of the organization's board of directors. That your organization follows New Hampshire conflict of interest laws as defined by RSA 719A and RSA 292-6A. And that you acknowledge all information and documents created, accepted, or obtained by or on behalf of CDFA are potentially subject to disclosure in compliance with RSA 91A, New Hampshire's right to know law. And finally, that the organization will accept CDFA's 10-year performance lien. We're going to talk about what that looks like, what the performance lien looks like later. So the certification needs to be signed by the organization's authorized official. And who is the authorized official? It's typically the CEO or board president. And you do need to download and print out the certification to get their actual signature on this document. When applying to CDFA tax credits myself in the past, I have, early on in my career, I got to this section and then had to really scramble because I realized that I needed the signature of my CEO, and the CEO was on vacation. So please do learn from my mistake. Maybe do this thing first and then have them review the application afterward. So section 1 of this is applicant information. You're going to be asked to provide a title for your application. The recommendation is please keep it short and simple. Otherwise, CDFA may rename the project for you. Who will be the primary contact for the application? So in addition to your authorized official, you want to name who your primary contact is so that when CDFA has questions, they know who to call. That person also needs to be registered on GMS, and could be the same as authorized official, or could be, for example, a project manager. Then just obviously what's the name of the organization, and then identify any additional contacts who will be associated with the application. The next section in the application is statutory eligibility. CDFA's founding legislation and foundational guidance for the tax credit program can be found in New Hampshire RSA 162L. Statutory eligibility is required to receive a tax credit award. So the first part of that is that applicants must fit one of these organization types. A community development corporation, a nonprofit organization involved in community development, a municipal government, an employee cooperative, or a different type of cooperative. Typically, most applicants for a CDFA tax credit award are nonprofit organizations involved in community development, and some are municipal governments. The next thing asked for is a brief narrative as to the mission of your organization, its structure, type, and governance. And then we ask you to identify your project type from a drop-down list. And the options are housing, community economic development, or both. And again, if you need some or would like some guidance as to what your eligible applicant type is or your project type is, please reach out. Continuing on statutory eligibility, these documents serve to confirm your eligibility, and some of these fields listed here, these are called the threshold attachments. Some of these are required and others are optional. If you are a nonprofit, as most applicants are, you will need to upload the documentation listed here, such as your IRS determination letter. If for some reason you think you're eligible, but one or more of these attachments are not applicable to your organization, please do call CDFA or bring that up during the pre-app application meeting. And if you are a fiscally sponsored organization, we do have fiscal sponsored guidance to help you figure out what needs to be uploaded for your organization. A link to that is in the application and guidelines, but please know that you will need a fiscal sponsor agreement and financials, the fiscal sponsor financials. So moving to the tax credit request. Tax credits are usually awarded over 2 state fiscal years. And here we ask you to break down by state fiscal year the tax credit award your organization needs to be successful. We ask that all applicants only request the amount of tax credits really needed for your project. It does not help to inflate your request. If your project were to receive a tax credit award, the award may not be distributed in the exact fiscal years you requested, but still your answer to this question helps us make allocation decisions. The state fiscal year, which we always talk about state fiscal years in this program, runs from July 1 to June 30th, and they're named after the calendar year in which they end. So for example, we're currently in state fiscal year 2025, which ends on June 30, 25. This application round is for tax credits in state fiscal years 2026 and 2027. In this section, we also ask you to provide your total project cost. And so this should come from your project budget, and forgive me if this sounds obvious, but it does need to match the total project cost you include in the budget section. Section 4 of the application is project and readiness information. Again, you put your project name, your project address. Sometimes, many times, applications are for a new building or a new address that's different than your existing organizational address. So just let us know where your project will be located. You want to write an executive summary. This is a brief and concise description of the project you're seeking tax credits for, why you are seeking them, the problem you are addressing, and the outcomes you are expecting. My suggestion as a very seasoned grant writer is that you write this section last. It's easiest to write a synopsis to something you've already written. And then you move on to the property description section. If this project involves the acquisition, construction, or renovation of real estate, describe the property, its ownership structure, and the status of site control. Are you doing leasehold improvements? List any mortgages or deed restrictions that are on the property. Is there anything that would prevent CDFA from putting a use restricting mortgage lien on the property? We'll also ask you to attach, if appropriate, a recent property appraisal, planning and zoning approvals, and an asset management plan in the project information and public benefit attachments component of the application. And we are going to go through that later. Continuing on with project readiness and information, this is about the performance lien. So what CDFA places a 10-year performance lien on any property purchased, developed, or renovated with tax credit funds. And this simply means that CDFA seeks to have the option of having a prorated portion of tax credit funds returned if there's a sale or change of use in the property for 10 years. If your organization or project cannot accept a lien, CDFA does require an alternative, and CDFA reserves the right to reject any offer it determines insufficient to ensure performance security. So disbursement of any tax credit funds do not happen without the appropriate security in place for your project. The project timeline and readiness, this is your opportunity to describe, give a lot of detail about the project. When will the project begin? When will it be complete? If your project includes construction, you could discuss here the status of architectural and engineering plans and cost estimates, what permits, approvals, agreements, or other requirements are necessary to complete the project. Have they been secured? And if they haven't been secured, what is your strategy and timeline for securing them? This section is really a section to let us know that you understand all of the aspects of the project and successfully carrying it out. And so it is yet one more way for you to demonstrate the project's readiness for a tax credit award. There is a section in the application about the CDFA energy policy. Please see Appendix B of the application and program guide for a link to the energy policy. And Scott is going to go much more in depth on this later. Okay, here's another opportunity to pause for questions.
Great, thank you so much, Betsy. I'm going to start with a question around the bridge loans. Someone was looking to understand what percentage of organizations that receive funds ask for loans. And I would just say contextually, we really only receive a few requests for bridge loans. So typically that's not the pathway that the project pursues, but we have received, we do sometimes receive a handful of requests for those resources. I'd also just like to, go ahead.
I would just add that on projects that I've worked on when I've been a campaign counsel, often the project will go to the bank and the bank will lend based on CDFA pledges, and it's part of the bigger mortgage. So there are other options available to you as well.
Great, and I'll just reiterate one question that was answered, but is it ever a problem with businesses not sending payment? And I'd say that's not typically an issue, as our finance team invoices them in advance and then would follow up if any payment dates may slip through the cracks. So that's not usually an issue, but if it ever would become one and we would need to engage you as the project manager in following up with that business donor, we would certainly do so. And I'm not sure if you have any experience with that, Betsy, or wanted to comment further on that.
I've never had the experience where a business has not paid a pledge, a CDFA pledge. And I think that's what you just mentioned, that CDFA said the pledge reminders, or in CDFA language, invoice. That's really nice for the organization because CDFA does all that legwork of reminding and seeking the payment.
Absolutely. And then just a quick reminder that GMS is our online grants management system. So you're going to hear that acronym throughout the presentation. And we'll cover that, as Betsy mentioned, more in depth a little bit later on. Another question that we had is, a project cost is $6.8 million, asking for $500,000 in tax credits. How do you match project cost to ask amount? Any recommendations?
I'm going to answer and then see, Melissa, please add. I would say that what you're looking at is what as you're building your financing for, say, for example, a $6.8 million project, I am assuming you have other sources of financing identified and or committed. And so what you see as the gap between your financing sources and any private fundraising is where we see CDFA tax credits stepping in. And so if you can demonstrate that that's the gap, then that's a reasonable ask.
I think that's absolutely aligned. And I just would add, we see CDFA being, 2% of some projects and then a larger percent of other projects. It really just depends on the project type and the necessary funding sources to get you across the finish line to be successful. We have another question. What happens if we cannot raise enough tax credits?
So the question, I guess, is, let me make sure I understand it. If you are awarded, say, $100,000 in tax credits and you can only secure pledges for $80,000, you don't get the money. It's the bottom line. And it's a problem because those tax credits are allocated and there are other projects that could have used them. So that's not a happy moment in anybody's project. So, or for anybody, including CDFA. And so in fact, that is exactly something that we look for in the application, in the evaluation, I should say, demonstrating that your organization or your coalition or wherever it is has the capacity to secure pledges for all of the tax credits that you're awarded is an important part of readiness. And so we do look at that and we ask you about that.
And I think, Betsy, that's why it's important to really ask for what you need, right? And also level set that with what you might have the capacity to fundraise at your organization. And then I'd also just note, Betsy's talked a lot about, like, we're here with you throughout this process, right? And so CDFA is really here to support you after you are awarded tax credits. And so we will be checking in with you about fundraising progress and offering any supports that we can to you throughout your project, so that hopefully you don't get to that point where there's a gap in terms of what you have been awarded and what you were able to fundraise. And then just a follow-up to that saying, does that mean we don't get any of the credits that we fundraised for, or just the difference? And that, I think, would be a really important conversation to have with CDFA staff, because it would likely, that situation, again, doesn't happen really often. It's not something we see as we're here to kind of support you throughout the process. So it doesn't get to that point. But that would probably be a conversation with CDFA staff to determine if you can be successful with the amount of funds that you've raised and complete the project with those resources. All right. And then another question along those lines, does CDFA help with selling the tax credits?
For this program, no, CDFA does not actively participate in selling the tax credits. We do offer a lot of resources, though. One is that Tax Credit 101 training that I described earlier. That is a virtual training session on how best to set up a campaign, market your tax credits, how to make the case for support. And we have a panel of both previous awardees who've successfully sold tax credits, as well as businesses that purchase tax credits. And we ask them questions and ask for their personal experiences. So it's a really great way for you to learn how to do that. I will say in the capacity building tax credits, it's different. So if you are really concerned about or curious about what CDFA can offer if you're applying for a capacity building tax credit award, please do attend that application overview next week.
All right, we have a couple more questions that I'm going to work through regarding fundraising, and then I think I'm going to move us along, just because we do cover a lot of that in other programs, and again, are here to support you throughout that process. So how long do we have to raise the funds once awarded?
So you are notified of the award in June 2025. You can start fundraising in July. All pledges are due by March 30th or 31st, whatever it is in March, 2026. And the businesses must fulfill their pledge by June 30, 2026. So you have 9 months. Typically what I see is that people get the award, very excited. You can start planning your campaign over the summer and then launch right into it in September. Part of the application also is that we ask for, that may help you when you think about this, is that we do ask for, if you have any businesses that are interested in purchasing tax credits, you can submit letters of intent to purchase a tax credit from a business, or you can submit letters of interest in purchasing a tax credit. So one is more of a commitment, one is more of a, if it's awarded, we'll strongly consider. And so you could start your outreach during the application process.
And just one more clarifying question, I think building off that is, if we're conservative about our ability to secure pledges for 100% of our ask, is it reasonable strategy to request 50% of the need this year and a separate application for 50% next year? And this might be a good time to kind of readdress that there's 2 potential years that you could request tax credits in. Betsy, I don't know if you want to kind of talk them through that.
Sure. If you get a tax credit award, it will be for 2 years. So I don't recommend going through the application process. It is a very big application. So why not ask for what you need over 2 years now?
Yeah, and so the application will prompt you actually to put in your entire amount of the tax credits that you requested, and then kind of divvy up that whole amount over 1 or 2 years, depending on the size of your request. So that is a clear component in the application. So with that, I think let's move us further into that application with our next slide.
Okay. This section is public benefit and public purpose. And so earlier I described how the evaluation considers public benefit and public purpose and readiness. Public benefit and public purpose is where you're going to spend the bulk of your narrative writing. This is where the section in which you make the case that your project fits the tax credit program mission of providing public benefit for a public purpose within the context of the tax credit program objectives and priorities. So the first question is, please describe the community economic development or housing issue your organization will address. So for example, is the project located in a CDFA priority area or serving primarily priority populations? You can use data to provide context for your discussion. In fact, that's highly recommended. Does the data that's available support the issue you are addressing? And if it doesn't, why do you think that might be? So for example, this isn't a great example, but for example, if you are doing an affordable housing development, everybody knows in the state knows the need for affordable housing in every community, but you still want to find the data. How critical is that issue relative to other communities? What kind of housing is particularly needed? Is it family housing? Is it studio and 1-bedroom housing? That sort of thing. So just you can find the data and really make the case for support. Your proposed solution, this narrative option, is how you describe how the project addresses or solves the issue described above, and why is your organization qualified to address it? How does the project fit within the community's broader strategy or plan? And how does your project address community needs? So if your project, for example, will benefit a priority population, this is your opportunity to describe it. And one way to understand community needs is by using CDFA's community progress indicators that are available on the Resource Hub, and Nate will go into that much more later on in this webinar. Continuing on with public benefit and purpose, this community input and support section is where you provide evidence of the community input and support for your project. What was the process used to bring community members together to design this project? Does the project have the support of the community? How can you demonstrate community support? Does it already align with the already established community priorities as evidenced by something such as a community master plan. Here's where you can provide the names and roles of any other organizations that have or will be involved in the design, development, building, and completion of this project, along with any that will be engaged in it once done. We're gonna pause right now on this deep dive into the application itself to tell the story of one successful project. So I'm gonna turn it over to Scott for that.
Hello, so I'll be telling you a little bit about the Southeast Land Trust, which conserves and stewards land for the benefit of people and nature in New Hampshire, serving 52 towns and cities of Rockingham and Strafford counties, and has conserved tens of thousands of acres since 1980. CDFA provided $450,000 in tax credits for Southeast Land Trust, or SELT, to establish the Center for People and Nature at Burley Farms in Epping. And you can see the example of this cool building, very cool building in the picture. The project was completed in 2023 and includes the construction of this 7,000 square foot energy efficient building and the rehabilitation of a historic 1785 farmhouse. The work will result in the creation of a working farm, two-bedroom workforce housing units, the creation of 2 jobs, and employment for environmental educators who provide nature-based education through CELT and partner-driven programs. The project also provides offices for CELT and at least 2 nonprofit partners. There's a public trail system on the property, a community meeting room, and a farmer's market located there. The net zero energy building is driven by solar power and an energy efficient design. CELT estimates that the farm will touch more than 7,000 individuals annually. They actively sought community input and support to create the vision and plan for this Center for People and Nature. And they started with focus groups held throughout the service area. They had annual meetings. They had interviews with community leaders and organizations, as well as with local businesses who saw this as an economic driver. In short, CELT spent a great deal of time and energy to educate and receive input from a broad spectrum of community members. The input resulted in a project that served local needs and resulted in broad local support, which also enhanced their fundraising efforts. Back to you, Betsy.
Thank you, Scott. So that was a great example of how one organization described the public benefit and public purpose. We'll have a couple more project examples going forward. But right now we're going to continue with the deep dive into the application with the public benefit and public purpose section. This section asks you to define the project's outcome measures. What are the goals and measurable outcomes of your project, and what is your methodology for tracking them? How will success be measured or evaluated? You have the opportunity here to write a narrative and answer some specific questions if applicable, such as how many jobs will be retained or created. We want to know what you think will make this project a success. What's on the screen are examples of outcome measures, but we're looking for you to describe what makes your project impactful and what those measurements should be. Whatever they are, please be sure to make them realistic and measurable. And I'm going to turn it back over to Scott to tell us the story of another successful applicant organization.
Great. So Mountaintop Music Center is a Conway-based nonprofit which has been offering top quality music education programs and a variety of concerts in the greater Mount Washington Valley since 1996. They are growing, but they lacked space to provide instruction. In addition to securing expanded space for instruction and performances for its own organization and ensuring access to community groups for some space, Mountaintop will also realize several specific measurable outcomes. The successful renovation and revitalization of the historic but vacant Baldock block enables Mountaintop to remain in Conway Village instead of moving elsewhere and retain its existing 13 full-time and part-time positions. Mountaintop forecasted 12% growth through increased enrollment, which would also help them to add 1 to 2 more staff. The organization's application used census data to show significant underinvestment in an area surrounding this property, and they demonstrated significant regional economic impact potential from the project. With the return of renovated ground floor commercial space that had been lost, Mountaintop anticipates leasing 4 distinct spaces, leading to between 8 to 10 new jobs in Conway Village. This job creation estimate is based on preliminary discussions with more than 24 prospective tenants. Additionally, Mountaintop anticipates one of the commercial spaces will be used for a cafe that will generate meals tax revenue for the state of New Hampshire. The restoration of commercial space will also create significant new revenue for the organization, estimated at $33,000 annually, and which will help cover most of the overhead costs associated with this entire 15,000 square foot property. This valuable commercial space in Conway Village will also generate annual local property taxes of approximately $4,500 to Conway for each year following the project. And the overall benefit to the local economy was estimated at approximately $2 million. So Mountaintop completed significant due diligence before proceeding with their application. Each of the outcomes delineated above can be measured directly through Mountaintop's financial statements, or as in the case of jobs that were created through the renovation of the commercial space, direct discussion with the tenants to find out that information.
I might just ask
Thank
one
you, Scott.
clarifying question before
Sure.
we move from this section, is just clarifying between outputs and outcomes. And I'm not sure, Scott or Betsy, if you want to take that.
I mean, typically in this program, we're talking about outcomes, and the outcomes are typically measurable activities where you can have a goal and something measurable that you're looking to complete. With these projects, oftentimes that's the development of a space, or a program, but it's important for us to understand what the benefit that provides and that the outcomes that relate to that. That might take, a year or more after the project is complete to achieve. So output isn't necessarily something that we use in terminology in the program.
Okay. Thank you, Scott and Melissa. So we are going to continue on with our section 5, public benefit and purpose. And this section is about the attachments. This section is your opportunity to upload each of these kind of attachments identified here on the slide. None of these are required, but they do strengthen your application if you have them. So, and it using them or uploading them demonstrates the readiness of your project, or can help demonstrate the readiness of your project. And if you have other items that are not listed on here, you can use the other attachments section to upload things as it demonstrates readiness. And I'm going to turn it now back over to Scott for the third in our 3 stories of successful applicants.
And I'm back again. So this example focuses on the importance of capacity, especially organizational capacity. The Belknap Mill Society's mission is to preserve the Belknap Mill as a unique historic gathering place and to celebrate the Lakes region's cultural heritage through the arts, education, and civic engagement. The project renovated and preserves the Belknap Mill in Laconia and supports the downtown revitalization taking place within the community. It also strengthens the city's creative economy and provides increased access to vital community resources. Their first application in 2017 was not approved by CDFA, due primarily to readiness concerns related to lack of fundraising progress and a gap in organizational leadership. CDFA met with representatives from Belknap Mill and over the year addressed areas that needed strengthening. Key improvements in their second application included raising additional funds for renovations and establishing a paid executive director position, giving the director time to develop and implement comprehensive programming that would be the mainstay of ongoing financial sustainability for the Belknap Mill. They also had 7 businesses that committed to purchasing tax credits and were able to document that, which is something they did not have the first time they applied. They had a promise, but they needed to build capacity to give CDFA confidence that they could complete the project and raise the $390,000 of their gross tax credit award. Now we see the Belknap Mill and the Colonial Theater, another downtown Laconia project, supported by tax credits, that they are collaborating on programming and how to best serve their community's needs. So now I'll turn it back over to Betsy, who will talk about financial and project information that we require to evaluate your organization and your project.
Okay, thank you, Scott. So this is section 6. That's finance, implementation, and fundraising capacity. Section 6 of the application is all about demonstrating readiness and helping CDFA to understand your organizational financial picture and the project financing structure. The first question is project funding. Here's an opportunity for you to describe why your project needs tax credit funding. Are you pursuing other sources of financing? If so, what other sources are you pursuing and what's the current status? CDFA, as Melissa mentioned earlier, CDFA has been 2% of a project's total cost and up to 80% of a project's total cost, but there is always other financing. Much more typically, we're somewhere in the middle. The history with CDFA, any of CDFA's programs, we ask you to provide all funding history with CDFA, including the program and the amount of the grant or loan and its current status. We're interested in understanding your level of experience with CDFA, if any. For other public-private investments, how has your organization received or administered grant funds or loans from other sources in the past 5 years? And if so, please describe. Here, we're interested in your organizational capacity to manage an award. And then in the project implementation section, you can describe your organization's current staff and capacity to carry out the implementation of your proposed project. What will their responsibilities be? This, again, is a readiness question. Here's your chance to demonstrate your ability to pull off the proposed project. And then finally, the fundraising plan. And this I mentioned earlier. What is your plan for obtaining tax credit commitments? Have any business donors expressed an interest in purchasing CDFA tax credits from you if they are awarded? Does your organization have the capacity to raise tax credits from businesses outside of your region? So for example, if you are in Manchester, are there any statewide businesses that you have a connection with? This is your opportunity to demonstrate the strength of your business networks and organizational capacity to carry out a tax credit campaign. Continuing with section 6, every applicant must submit several financial documents. What exactly is required is clearly identified in the application and program guide. And again, Melissa's going to put a link to CDFA's financial explainer in the chat. And the link is also in the app and program guide and will be in the follow-up emails. If your organization, if the applying organization is one that's fiscally sponsored, we do have guidance for fiscally sponsored projects, and that is also linked in the application and program guide. So for this next slide, we are still on section 6. This is also a section where you can use to demonstrate readiness. These listed on here are the attachments you can upload. Some of these are self-explanatory, but I will go into a few of them. The letters of intent to purchase tax credits. This is a letter from a business saying that if your organization is successful in its application and is awarded tax credits, it will purchase tax credits. It's best if they commit to a certain amount or an amount range. As Scott mentioned, Belknap Mill, in its second application, came in with 7 letters of intent to purchase tax credits, and that really strengthens the application because it does demonstrate the strength of the business networks and that you have actual commitments from businesses. Other project funding is also important to identify. So tell us who are your other sources of funding, and if you can, upload commitment letters or letters of intent to fund from those other sources. And this is all because the status of the financing for your project as a whole is a very important part of project readiness, and we consider all sources of funding when evaluating the application. All right, so this slide, this is the final slide for section 6. And in this section, you are asked to identify if your organization has any access to any of these additional financial tools. Does your organization have an operating reserve, an endowment, or a line of credit? It's helpful to CDFA's financial review of the applicant organization and project for us to know this detail. If there are things in your organizational financial statements or other information about your organization's financial picture that would be helpful to explain, please write up and upload an organizational financial status review. For example, maybe your organization has a very large operating reserve. That would make us wonder why you need tax credits. So this is your opportunity to explain that the endowment or the operating reserve perhaps is restricted, or there is a planned other use for it, or your organization may have received a particularly large bequest that results in a very large operating surplus in 1 year. So again, this is your opportunity to explain anything that might look odd or generate a question if it weren't explained. And here also there's an opportunity to upload other attachments as needed that you think will help explain your organization's financial picture. Okay, so section 7, now we're turning to the project budget and project financing. This is the opportunity to provide CDFA with detailed information about the project financials for the project for which you're requesting tax credits. And this section has 2 tables for you to fill out. The first is project funding sources. You can tell us the funding source, the amount, and whether that funding is actually committed, pending, or planned. The total of all should add up to your total project budget. And then there is a table that is a project budget. This tells us how funding from each of the funding sources will be used. For example, you could use tax credit funds for renovation costs and funding from another source to purchase the property. Finally, we do ask for a budget narrative, and this is very helpful. We ask that you give a detailed description of each line item in the project budget, the underlying budget assumptions, and any additional information that will help explain the project. This is very helpful to you because it gives you the opportunity to really go into detail, if needed, about aspects of the budget that might raise questions or you just want to explain beyond the numbers. We do encourage applicants to create a project budget offline first using Excel. Make sure the numbers add up. Again, I'm sorry if this sounds very basic, but having done a lot of applications, I do know that this is where sometimes mistakes can happen. Make sure the numbers add up and your assumptions are correct. And once you have a final budget, then you can enter the numbers into these 2 tables. Finally, we're back to certification, which is where we began. And I'm going to pause here for questions since we already covered that.
Thanks, Betsy. Just noting that we see some additional questions about tax credit requests and how much that should be for each project. And I'd say that's a very nuanced question and would encourage, if you're wondering how much you should be requesting for tax credits, likely a good topic to bring up during your pre-application meeting with CDFA staff. And we have someone who's interested in developing a project for which they may apply in 2026. May we request a meeting this year anyways to discuss it? And we would strongly encourage, yes, just to make sure that we're connecting with you early on in the project development cycle to answer any questions you might need to anticipate a 2026 application. The next one, Betsy, is about do you recommend letters of support to demonstrate community support? So for example, a local government or state government letter demonstrating support for your project.
That's a great question. I think letters of support are helpful to demonstrate everything we're looking for, such as community support, the need for the project, so public purpose and benefit, and the organizational capacity. So for example, a local city government might say, we know this organization, we believe they're capable, this need is critical, and we were a part of their process of community engagement, and we see that the community recognizes the need for this.
Great. And I'm not seeing any other questions at this time. There is one related to GMS that we'll cover when we get to that section. But otherwise, as folks come up with questions, please do continue to drop them in, as we should have time towards the end of the presentation to answer additional questions.
Great, thank you. So as I mentioned earlier about that CDFA, adherence to CDFA's clean energy policy is a part of demonstrating readiness. And so Scott is now going to come back and talk about CDFA's clean energy policy.
All right, thanks, Betsy. So yeah, I'm going to discuss the policy as it relates to your application. And again, this is a requirement of the program, this policy. So we'll get into the details of that. So CDFA provides several resources for applicants seeking to improve their facilities' energy efficiency or add renewable energy, including low-interest financing and CDFA energy and financing technical assistance to help applicants build a better project. Slide. CDFA aims to ensure that our investments support projects working to reduce future operating costs, improve occupant comfort and health, and to ensure facility durability. The energy policy supports applicants in identifying energy opportunities and potential funding and financing resources. The requirements apply to all CDFA applications proposing a physical alteration to any existing energy system, which would be like your building envelope, mechanical systems, lighting, etc., or for new construction, which would include additions or a gut rehab. Your completed energy assessment or a clear plan and time frame for completing this requirement must be included in your tax credit application. In some cases, if your project does not impact energy systems, applicants can explain this in the energy narrative so CDFA can consider waiving the policy for the project. On this next slide, you'll see the energy section of the energy policy there. The policy is available on our resource website and through a link in the application and program guide, so you can look at this in more detail. This table shows the energy policy requirements. The two key requirements highlighted are that the applicant complete a level 2, what's called a level 2 energy audit or an energy charrette, and that you consult with the appropriate utility for potential implementation incentives. We want to make sure you don't leave potential opportunities and funding on the table, as the funds from incentives could help improve the project design and future savings. Please note that the application threshold, what's required for your application, is not necessarily that you have the energy audit or design charrette already completed. It really depends on what stage you are in your design. At the time of application, you must provide either the completed energy assessment report or a clear description, a clear plan and time frame for completing the requirements. And a plan might include a proposal from or an email correspondence with an energy consultant describing the energy assessment scope, what you plan to do, and the estimated completion date. Again, not exact, but in this month, we'll complete the energy assessment and it'll be this type of assessment. Energy assessments completed after the application still must be completed prior to the final design development for your project or the final equipment specifications. That would be projects without an architect or design consultant. Most important here is that you reach out to me if you have any questions, and I'm glad to discuss this. And also note that there's a list of recommendations towards the bottom of the policy there that we highly recommend you take a look at. If you have questions, reach out to me. And these include a number of different items related to renewable energy and electrifying buildings. I also wanted to note that there are some resources available also through a link in the guide that lead to the NH Saves program. And these are the contacts there that you can look back at. The earlier your utility is aware of your project, the better positioned they are to offer incentives and to talk with you about options for your project. Please let them also know you are applying for CDFA funds. As far as next steps, review this CDFA energy policy with your design team. Make sure that they're aware of this so they can reach out, or you can all reach out together. Contact your utility representative, as I just mentioned, to discuss potential support for your project. Regarding energy audits and charrettes, contact me. I'm glad to discuss this with you for your options. and provide a clear plan and timeline in the energy narrative section for meeting these requirements, and that's in your tax credit application. Again, please reach out with any questions. Thank you very much. And Melissa, I don't know if there's any questions related to this.
I'm not seeing any come through just yet, but they might come through towards the end. So definitely, if you have questions, please drop them in the Q&A box, and we will again have time for that at the end. Thanks, Scott.
Great, thank you. Oh, and Betsy, I think you're jumping back in, aren't you?
Yep.
Great.
Yep. Hold on. Sorry, am I off camera? Yes. Hello. So now we're going to go into data resources that are available to you that will help strengthen your argument that there's a strong public benefit and public purpose to your project. So Nate will talk with us about data resources available to you. Welcome, Nate.
Thank you, Betsy. Yeah, so backing up your application with data is a really awesome way to create a robust application. So things we'd love to see is you using data to clearly articulate the issue your project addresses and why it matters to the community. Connect your project goals directly to CDFA's funding priorities, emphasizing how your project supports our mission, and using data to help highlight how your organization understands the issues and is committed to addressing community needs effectively. Including diverse types of data strengthens your application. And so examples of what that might mean is utilizing local data to highlight community challenges your project will address. That would be in the community needs bucket, looking at program impact, showcasing results from past or similar projects to demonstrate the potential outcomes of your initiative, benchmarks and comparisons, reference state or national data to put your project's goals in context and show how they align with broader trends. And from these trends include historical data to demonstrate how the issues have evolved or persisted over time, reinforcing the urgency of funding. When it comes to data, finding reliable data is super important. And so when we're thinking about the data that we're using, focusing on pulling data from trusted and relevant sources helps us ensure accuracy. Sources can come from many different levels. So we could have national level sources, agencies like the Census Bureau, the CDC, the Department of Ed, provide credible statistics that are publicly accessible. You could also have local sources. One great example in New Hampshire is New Hampshire Community Profiles. There are also municipal reports or community surveys, which offer valuable regional or region-specific insights. We could also look at academic research, so peer-reviewed studies or university-led research to help add depth and reliability to your application. And you can also include data from your own organization. So that could include internal data, such as evaluations or reports that you all have done, or case studies that highlight your track record of success. Data isn't just about numbers, it's about building a compelling and evidence-based story that resonates with the CDFA's mission. And so we want to use data to strategically highlight your project's value and demonstrate measurable outcomes, again, that align with the CDFA's priorities. As we've seen, incorporating data into your application not only strengthens your case, but it also demonstrates alignment with CDFA's priorities. At this point, you might be wondering where to start, or you could feel a little overwhelmed by the sheer amount of data that's available. And so if you're feeling this way, CDFA has tools and resources specifically designed to make this process easier for you. And so we're going to start by taking a closer look at the community progress indicators and how they might help in this data journey. So since 2019, the CDFA has partnered with the New Hampshire Fiscal Policy Institute to identify data and information that helps us quantify or gives us one lens to look at socioeconomic and community strengths, issues, and challenges. The result of this collaboration is the Community Progress Indicators and the Core Data Index, which are a curated set of reliable and up-to-date data that can be used to support your grant applications if you would like. The first set of indicators were released officially in January of 2020, and we work annually with the Fiscal Policy Institute to update our data. Updated community progress indicators are posted on our website each December for use in the upcoming calendar year. And the complete data set for 2025 is now available and ready for you to use as you put together your application. These indicators can help you identify community needs. They can help you benchmark your project against broader trends, and they can help you align your application again with CDFA's funding priorities. An example of 3 of these indicators and how they differ across New Hampshire communities and counties are visualized on the slide above, just as an example to help you understand how data can help you see differences between communities, which might drive particular projects. Now that we've discussed what community progress indicators are and how the data in general can strengthen your application, I want to talk about how to access these resources. We've organized a series of tools to help you at every step of the way, and those tools that your kind of launch pad is the CDFA data page. So starting from the CDFA data page, that's link number 1. This page serves as your gateway to the data resources that we internally create, or sort of collect. From that starting point, the first resource I want to point out on that particular page, so link number 2 on the slide, is I want to draw your attention to the Community Progress Indicators Summary Table. This is a great place to start. This table provides a comprehensive list of the 13 indicators that we track, and it could help you quickly identify ones that might be relevant to your application. Once you've identified indicator areas of interest from link number 2, you might move on to link number 3, which is the Community Progress Indicators Data Dictionary. This resource gives you a detailed description of each indicator, considerations for its use, as well as the source of the data. So all of the data that we use, again, is publicly accessible data. So you can go to the source and get more detail potentially if you're interested in that. And that's going to help you just ensure that you have the context you need to use it effectively. After selecting an indicator or 2 and understanding them better through the data dictionary, you might look at link number 4, which is the actual data. The 2025 Community Progress Indicators dataset provides the most recent data available for each indicator. It's organized alphabetically by county and then municipality. And so that's kind of to look at the most up-to-date data at county or municipality level. And then lastly, if you wanted to look at how those indicators have changed over time, we publish 2021 through 2025 Community Progress Indicator spreadsheet. So that's your go-to resource to look at how things have changed over time. And that, again, is going to help you add depth and context to your application potentially. Now that you know where to find the data and how to access the tools that the CDFA provides, the last step is to understand how to integrate that data effectively into your application. Whether a question explicitly asks for data or not, using data strategically can make your responses more compelling and aligned with CDFA's priorities. So let's explore some best practices for incorporating this data into your answers. So some questions in the application, as I said before, will explicitly ask for data. For instance, one of the questions in our application says, describe the community economic development and or housing issue to be addressed. Please use data from the community progress indicators to describe the issue in one or more of these areas. Under these categories, one or more of these areas, basic human needs, etc., under these categories to support your proposal. You may also use alternative data sources to support your proposal. In this question, you're asked directly to use data to strengthen your response. While CDFA provides the community progress indicators as an option, you can also use alternative data sources if they're a better fit for your project. And we really encourage you to make decisions about which data is most related to your project and choose sources accordingly. Other questions might not directly request data, but can still benefit from its inclusion. For example, in the executive summary, you're asked to describe the project, why you're seeking tax credits, the challenge or opportunity your project addresses, and the expected outcomes, including data from the community progress indicators to demonstrate the challenge or opportunity your project addresses can significantly enhance your response. Some questions you might ask yourself to help with this process are listed above on the slide. And in either case, effectively using data again, isn't just about using numbers, it's about building a clear and compelling narrative that integrates different data sources. If you have questions about incorporating data into applications, or any questions in general about our data page, feel free to reach out to me, Nate Olson, at that email address listed on the slide for support. Back to Betsy, unless there are any questions about data.
No questions just yet, and I think some might be addressed in the next couple slides. So I think we'll hold until the end of the presentation at this point, probably for questions.
Thank you. Oh, this is me again. Don't mind me. So in terms of next steps, the first thing that you're going to need to do is register for Grants Management System. And Grants Management System, or you hear us refer to again and again, GMS for short, is CDFA's data platform for managing our full grant lifecycle. So that's all the way from application through the closeout of a grant if a grant were to be awarded. Anyone who needs access to a grant needs to create a user profile in GMS. And this includes people like a grant writer, if you were to use one, the authorized official for your application, and the primary point of contact for your grant. For our grants management system, it's important that each user have a unique login to the system. Users should not be sharing accounts or passwords. Additionally, users should only have a single GMS account per person. If you have a GMS account already, perhaps you have applied to a prior funding round or some other CDFA program, you'll use that same account to apply to this program. For new users, the first step is to register at the link above. We've created a detailed step-by-step registration guide to help you through the process, and you'll also find that linked on the GMS page of the resource website and directly linked here on the slide. Please note that each new registration is reviewed and approved by CDFA staff, and so that may take up to 2 business days for your registration to be approved and you to be given access to our system. For existing users, simply log in with your current account credentials, and if you encounter any issues accessing your account, use our password recovery video or the buttons directly under on the login page, the forgot password, forgot username buttons. If you have any questions about registration or encounter any issues, Priscilla is going to be your point of contact for registration issues, and her email address is listed on this slide. After you've registered for GMS, you are then, and your registration has been approved, you will then be able to start a new application. And whether you're applying for tax credits or other funding opportunities, this step-by-step guide will get you on the right track. So this slide outlines the key steps for starting a new application within Grants Management System. First, you're going to log on with your new credentials or your old credentials. You can access the login page to the link provided on this slide or the link on the CDFA website. Once you're logged in, navigate to the funding opportunities section using the left-hand navigation menu. And that menu is where, from there, you'll be able to see all available funding opportunities that the CDFA offers. So not just this one, but all of our current open funding opportunities. For this particular application, you're looking for 2026 and 2027 investment tax credits. You'll see that listed under the ID number 34900. And finally, once you've identified the correct program, you're going to select Start New Application to begin the process. If you're unsure about any step, we've also linked a detailed guide to provide additional support, and that guide will walk you through the application process with screenshots and instructions, and a shortened version of that is on the next slide as well. So just visual steps of what you're going to see in grants management system. Cool. Lastly, we have a few quick tips. We've covered how to start an application. Let's go over some best practices to help you navigate GMS. One, please use the resources that we've made available to you. So the GMS section of CDFA's resource website has detailed guides that walk you through various processes. Be sure to consult these guides if you have any initial questions or need clarification before reaching out for support. Second, make sure you're drafting your responses outside of the system. We highly recommend this for two reasons. One, it makes sure that you have a copy of your responses, which makes it easier for you to use those same responses in other programs. So I think that's one reason to keep your responses on your own computer. But also, it's going to help in case there are any issues in our system. If you hit submit and it doesn't save for whatever reason, you have a copy that you can just copy paste back into our system and try to submit again. So really recommend drafting narrative responses outside of our system before pasting them into our system. Pay attention also to character counts. Some of our narrative, or all of our narratives, have character counts. And so if our system won't let you go over those character counts, it will just cut off your response once you've reached those character counts. So please pay attention to those. Start early and save often. Give yourself plenty of time to work on your application. Make sure you're saving your work frequently, inside and outside of our system. And similarly, make sure you're submitting ahead of the deadlines. Really aim to submit your application well before the deadline to avoid last-minute issues or delays. Technical problems or other unexpected obstacles are easier for us to handle when you have a little time to work with. It's always a little scary if you're a few hours before the deadline and you're unable to submit your application. So please get everything in and try to submit as soon as possible. Lastly, if you run into any issues while you're in grants management system for technical support issues, I'm your point. But for registration issues specifically, Priscilla is your point of contact. Thank you.
So Nate, I think I'll just ask you to clarify two things that have come up, or just reconfirm two things that have come up in the Q&A, is that each individual should have their own login credentials, and we should not be using just one single login for the organization, but every individual should have their own, correct?
Yes, that's correct. So your login credentials are specific to you as an individual, and then we also have a second object in our database called an organization. And so individuals, you will be related to an organization. So many people can be part of one organization in GMS, but we want each of those people to have their own accounts.
Great. And then as far as character counts go, that includes like words and spaces and commas and things like that, right? And those character counts are listed very clearly next to each application question within GMS. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. Something to note if you have been a past applicant is historically character counts have not always aligned with the character counts that show up in Word. This issue should have been corrected this year. And so you'll notice minor changes if you've been a prior applicant. There's no formatting allowed at all in our narrative section. So it's just like plain text that you're entering in. So you won't really be able to do, like, you can't put in a cool table or like pictures or anything like that. It's just text. But what that allows us to do is make sure our character counts in GMS match our character counts that you might find in any word processing tool. So if you're using the character count in Word, those character counts should align with GMS. So,
Great. So character count, not word count, is what you need to be looking at.
Oh, yes, 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 that's correct. Characters, not words. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, great. That's all I think we have currently for GMS. Betsy, you're gonna bring us home in these final minutes, right?
I am, but I have one thing to add to one of the questions I saw about multiple people working on an application. As Nate suggested strongly, work on your application in a Word document or a Google Doc, and outside of the application in grants management system, and that's where you can have multiple people working on the application. And then when everything is done, have one person upload everything. That is just my recommendation based on my experience. And if you want other people to review, do a final review in GMS, they can do so as long as they're registered, but don't have multiple people working on the application in GMS is my recommendation. Nate, do you have another suggestion?
Nope, I would support that recommendation wholeheartedly.
Great. All righty. So yes, we're going to bring this presentation home and open up to more questions. So here are the key dates for this application round. The application is available online in the CDFA's Grants Management System, GMS. We're going to email follow-up information from both of these workshops, including recordings, links to the app and program guide, resources, and a link to schedule your pre-application meeting coming up in the next few days. Registration is now open for the capacity building tax credit application writing workshop on January 16th. And that registration link will also be included. And I think Melissa's going to drop that link somewhere in the chat. Again, the deadline is March 7th by 4 p.m. Late submissions and incomplete applications will not be accepted. The deadline, there may be people on this webinar who may be a better fit for the capacity building subset of the tax credit program. The deadline for both is the same, but it is a separate application. Many folks are still figuring out which of the two tax credit programs best meets their project. So if you're still not sure, please reach out to CDFA staff and we can talk that through with you. Again, notification of the tax credit awards will happen the week of June 9th. All award recipients are invited to attend an event announcing the awarded projects to that following week, and that specific date is to be announced. And then the Tax Credit 101 workshop, tax credit award recipients are required to attend this virtual workshop on June 25th. The actual date and time is in the application guidelines, so be optimistic and put that in your calendar. This workshop will inform awardees about program logistics, resources, and lots of helpful information for crafting a successful tax credit fundraising campaign. And then regarding pre-application meetings, again, this is an excellent opportunity for you to learn more, for us to learn more about your project, answer any questions you may have about the program or application, as well as provide guidance that is very specific to your project. And again, information on how to schedule one of those will be included in follow-up information. Those meetings will take place January 15th through February 7th. All of us who will participate in those meetings have put block time off in our schedules to do that. But if you do have experience, if you experience any difficulties scheduling an appointment for a pre-app meeting, just let us know and we'll work around that. Okay, I'll open it up for questions.
Great, Betsy, perfect timing. I know we're closing out on that 11:30 timeframe. We did just have one question, I think remaining, is that can you print out the application questions with character limits as a PDF or Word for reference? And I think your message about going to that application and program guide is a great it's a great opportunity to remind folks that that first appendix actually in that application and program guide is exactly that, an outline of the application along with character counts. Yeah.
Here's my dog-eared copy, right? You
Yeah.
can print it out right now. And it will become as dog-eared as my copy is. So it's got all of this information, including character counts, links, obviously online. When you're looking at it on your online, all the links are active to all the resources we've described today.
And then we have another question about what's the best process for scheduling appointments. And that is going to be through a link in a follow-up email that we're going to send to you. So it'll be an online booking page for you to click through and register for a pre-application meeting. So hopefully a seamless process for scheduling those based on your schedules as well as CDFA staff. There was another question, I think, just generally about what percentage of applications typically get funded. And I'd say we get usually more than double at least the applications that we have funding to award. And that percentage really varies based on the requests within the round. But just consider that we are likely reviewing applications, around the $10 million request mark when we have about $5 million each year to allocate towards that. So it can be a competitive process. Betsy, would you add anything to that?
No, I would say it's definitely a very competitive program. So you should feel great if you get an award. And as somebody who's done a lot of these applications, I will say that it asks for an enormous amount of information, and what that does for your organization and your project is helps you assemble everything you will need for any other funder all in one place. So actually, if you think, why do they need this, somebody else will ask for it if they haven't already.
Great. I'm not seeing any additional questions, but just we'll make another pitch. Look at that follow-up email that we send. We encourage you to schedule those pre-application meetings so that we have some one-on-one time to